I know why you're here. You want to know if 12 megapixels is enough for professional work. My name's Tom Park and I run a production studio specialising in the creation of underwater and ocean-based destination marketing packages. And in my production, I use two of these Sony A7SIIIs, above and below the water. And honestly, when I bought this, I was a little nervous as to how this would compare to my older A7 III for stills. Video, no question, blows the A7 III out of the water, but as this camera has been kitted out for videographers, they've given this a 12 megapixel sensor to maximize 4K video output. And the question remains, is 12 megapixels enough for still photography? After close to a year using this on back-to-back client projects for photo and stills, I can confidently say that yes, it's epic. And I actually believe that enough that I've sold both of my A7 III bodies using this as my primary photo and video camera. While I love the images out of this camera, and so do my clients, it's important that you guys actually know what I'm shooting, as there are a number of use cases where this camera won't shine. Typically, I shoot a lot of lifestyle content on large tourism projects, catalog shoots for brands and ocean-based companies, and a wide variety of underwater content, both tourism and wildlife. You probably would have noticed through those images that my style isn't one that really calls for a lot of extensive cropping, especially when shooting underwater, where proximity to the subject is key to getting those clear and vibrant images. But if you are a photographer who shoots a lot of long landscapes or above water wildlife content, then you'd probably start to see the downfalls of the A7S III. But for me, who hardly ever crops, 12 megapixels is more than I'll ever need. It's clean, really clean. I've had shots used on the front pages of print catalogs. I regularly print images up to A2 in size, and depending on the shot, you can even blow them up to A1, which is seriously huge. This here's a recent shot from one of my favorite surf breaks to pass. And jumping into Lightroom, it's pretty clear that even at 12 megapixels, these files hold a lot of detail, even when punching in ridiculous amounts. Another example is this shot here, taken on the Coral Sea with Tourism Queensland. And not only are we able to retain significant detail even when punching in unnecessarily far, but we're also shooting underwater through water and particle, which effectively reduces the image quality and really punishes us when we have to crop. But where these cameras really shine is in their low light capability and their ability to deal with harsh shadows without creating noise. Due to the 12 megapixel sensor in here, these cameras are actually much better than the A7 III, which has double the megapixels, at dealing with super contrasty, high dynamic range moments like this shot here, allowing us greater flexibility to bring back those shadows without creating noise. Diving into the raw file, it's immediately apparent how spread the light in this image is. By exposing for the highlights, which is common practice, the foreground subject is almost pitch black. But due to the smaller megapixel count, all of this lost detail is recoverable with only minimal noise. The dynamic range and low light capabilities of this camera blow the A7 III out of the water. So for those sunset and sunrise shooters who shoot a lot in that HDR style, or who often shoot in low light scenarios, you will see noticeable improvements in this body over some of the other photo-specific bodies. Also, with improvements in AI image enhancement like Adobe Super Resolution mode, you can almost double the pixel count in some of your images, which for low megapixel count bodies like this is a real sweetener. No, it's a $6,000 camera built for videographers. And while I do love the stills this camera produces and believe that they are sufficient for client work, should you not require extensive cropping, the A7 III and A7R series cameras are still better stills cameras. For hybrid shooters though, whose primary production is in video production and stills are only a secondary deliverable, I honestly think this is perfect. It's capable of producing some really high quality images and even some rather large scale prints. I actually bought this with the full intention of keeping my A7 III bodies to use for still photography. But after using this for months in the field for client work, I actually preferred using this over the other models, so I sold them. If you're still on the fence, there's a few other areas where this camera really shines. The processor in this model is way faster, which means unless you're holding down the shutter for way longer than you need to be, you're not going to fill that buffer up, making shooting fast action really easy. The autofocus as well is incredible, and it can hold face and eye detection autofocus up to 6 stops under or overexposed. There's also some general improvements to things like weather sealing and highlights and the way the camera handles highlight roll-offs as well, which are always a nice touch. My clients are stoked with the images out of this camera, and I'm sure that yours will be too.